Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. This Monday afternoon, we should be buzzing, Quinny. I'm Paul John Tykes. This is the mighty Quinn. It's transfer deadline day. The window will be slamming shut in a matter of hours. And Brendan Rodgers has already said, Quinny, we're notorious for doing our business late. I don't think we've ever been this notorious. We are leaving it late. We do have massive gaps, as yesterday's game probably strengthened. In the starting 11, in the squad, lots of work to do, Quinny.
Yeah, we're firmly in the realms of parody now, aren't we? Where it's beyond a joke at this point, you know. There's leaving it late and there's leaving it this late. And, you know, I was kind of setting myself up for today anyway. It's a busy day for me on all fronts. But the English window closes like a few hours before us. And when I seen that earlier today when I was kind of planning my day out, I was like, oh, you just know that we're going to wait for some people marooned on an island somewhere that need out of a club, and we'll just be the one. We'll take you. You know, we'll save you from the bench of Brentford or whatever it's going to be. You know, so yeah, parody is kind of where I'm at with the business today.
Right. Well, actually, on that point, and I make a point. Most Mondays, they bring in this mug out because it's Happy Mondays, right? And we're happy to be here, of course, Quinny. We're happy to talk about Celtic, but is it going to be a happy Monday? I don't know. I'll tell you what the most worrying aspect of this is that I've been hearing is, let's go even just to Anthony Joseph, very good source, very credible source, and Celtic minded as well. He's appeared on a few podcasts talking about his support of Celtic, right? Doesn't hide it, fair play. He's talking about 4 signings for Celtic, and we'll get to the actual names and who they are and the profiles in a second. But the 4th one is that AN other that you talk about. Now, for Celtic to have a recruitment department, for us to have a football doctor, Quinny, right? And you know what? It's not as if they only, work contract work through transfer windows. They are working all year round, scouting teams, data teams, the football doctor. If we're scratching about, waiting for somebody to contact us, and it'll be an agent, obviously, just, pushing players on us. If we're waiting at this stage for one of those 4 to be that type of player, that's shambolic at this level, Quinny.
Yeah, as I say, be absolutely beyond parody. It's one of those ones as well when you see the Dolberg one, the way it's moving, and when it initially came out, it was like, oh, well, Anderlecht are out of Europe, so that's now dislodged him in some way or whatever. But they were in the Conference League in the first place, you know, so like us holding back or not entertaining that move until like we're all eliminated from stuff. It's it's just too much. You know, I was thinking about this. I didn't mention it. I had my breakdown of the match on Celtic Here Go Live like really early today. And
you actually had a break. You had a breakdown, or you broke the match down. Which was it, Quinny?
definitely. I'm ticking both boxes on that one. All of the above. I meant to say it in there, and I kind of didn't. But it also doesn't just relate to the football, but it also relates to the transfer policy, as you're saying it there. And it's, you know, if you've ever played chess against a kid, or if you've ever played chess with somebody who doesn't know how to play chess, they never try and win. Your natural instinct is always just to like protect pieces and not actually try and move up the board or whatever. It's reactionary. It's probably just the best way of summing it up, if you know what I mean. And if you think about football as the wee pieces moving across the board, or even if you think about transfers as the little pieces moving across Europe or whatever, if we are constantly waiting to see what ones get taken off us and then what ones become available to get taken, you're never going to win. You're never going to actually advance forward. You're just going to basically just wait to get gotten, which is kind of where we're at the moment, is we are gotten. You know, we are just sitting there in limbo, one piece away. If somebody comes and takes a piece off us right now, we're screwed. You know, like we are really on threadbare, as it were, even with, you know, Balquisha and Sriracha coming in another day, you know, but, you know, there's a lot of people making stuff of, and maybe rightly so, Rodgers' comments post-match. He's kind of emphasising 4-year cycles and guys that have been here, and there is still some murmurings around some people I'm seeing in group chats and live chats and everything. Maybe Dyson could still be out the door this window, probably January at this stage, if we're being real about it. But in any case, that's where we're sitting right now, is we're just reacting to everything, and if a piece gets taken off us, can we take a piece back somewhere? And, you know,
Reactive.
you should be you should be setting out knowing what pieces you want and going after them.
Absolutely, you know? And you know the thing as well, right? We get a lot of this, and I don't mind it at all, right? We get a lot of this. What do you know? You've never played at a level. You've never been involved in a football team or a football club or an organisation. You don't have to have been to know that the way Celtic are doing the business is shambolic. You don't have to have been. You know, it's like someone said to me last night about, oh, you quite clearly you've never played football. Well, neither has Ailey Barber or Arthur Montford, as far as I'm aware. Was Archie McPherson a sweeper? I don't know, but he done all right talking about football. fans can talk about football, and I'll tell you something. I get as much sense, and always have found this. You know, travelling on the supporters buses. I always going about that because not everybody has that experience. You know, some people are close to the stadium and all that, but travelling on the supporters buses, absolutely, you heard a hell of a lot of nonsense, Quinny, but you heard a lot of sense, a hell of a lot of sense. And often when I was younger, I would go to the games after listening to these conversations, and I was very much a sponge, and then I'd watch what they were talking about and think, wow, they have observed this, and I'm now watching it in real time. I'll also find, linking into Friday night show with the Not the View boys, Celtic fans largely are ahead of the curve. We see things because we're not just going to bend over, I don't think, even for our own club, and just take the nonsense that they try and feed us, you know. And I always felt that the fanzines of those times were ahead of the curve. I think you look at our ultras, they're ahead of the curve when it comes to the political activism as well. And I've always felt a huge part of being a Celtic fan is being educated, Quinny. I've been educated throughout my Celtic supporting life about football, about politics, and about everything else that we talk about on Acsom as well, which often brings in music and film and all that, literature. It's all mainly from Celtic supporting allies that you speak to on shows like this, that you speak to on the supporters buses, in boozers, at work, etc. So I absolutely welcome Celtic supporters coming in with their views and their opinions. And by the way, it's not an echo chamber, so you can disagree with us. We're going to be talking about yesterday, the performance, before we move on to where we are. And the first suggestion of today goes to Jungle Lion. And he says that we should be doing a show tonight at 10 till 11. Well, listen, you have suggested that, Jungle Lion. I'm going to put it out to the comment section. If we've got enough people saying, aye, I'm up for that, I'll jump on at 10 o'clock. Absolutely no sweat. I'll jump on at 10 o'clock and we will talk transfers for an hour to see who's in, who's out, and how disappointed or happy we're going to be at the end of that. Let's talk about the game yesterday. Going into it, Quinny, I've said this before, I don't generally watch games that Rangers are involved in. It's just something that doesn't really take my fancy. It's not my thing. No criticised anybody that does it. But I did watch the game last week against St Mirren to try and get a sense of their shape, their weaknesses, their strengths. And instantly, I looked at the central defensive area at Rangers and thought, rotten. I looked at John Souttar, thought the guy is overweight, he's slow. I know he said his injuries. Target him. We didn't do that yesterday. And I don't know why. I mean, we played Maeda through the middle, and I'm just thinking, terrorise him. Put the ball over the top and terrorise him all day long. Why are we not doing that?
It was a bit of a mystery, wasn't it? I thought at the beginning of the game we did set out to try and get after them. When you see Dyson leading the line through the middle, Negren's had good energy, although he's not like grease lightning, is he, across the pitch, you know, but he still like covers the ground, still goes for it. And Balikwisha, you know, covers the ground, you know, obviously didn't at the weekend, but he can. But it didn't, it just didn't ever really pan out. And in terms of that, I'm not too sure why it didn't happen. I'm definitely seeing and hearing a lot of people in the aftermath saying like Dyson didn't really turn up, didn't really leave it all out there. And there's maybe a little bit of that adds into it, but I don't know. It felt like it was very much more a case of don't let Rangers score. You know, like it's like the chess thing. That's kind of where it came from initially. So it was from the match. You know, we just didn't set out to take any pieces out of the equation. You know, we didn't set out to actually, you know, control the pitch. You know, control the middle ground, do anything like that. So, in terms of the front line, why we didn't press and get after them? Because I agree. Like, if you look at some of the big games we've had, even all the way back under Ange, if you think about this kind of generation of the team, there's been two things that have kind of made a difference for us. Number one has been like errors, has been like absolutely getting in amongst them, like mega press, you know, get after them, don't let them out their box, harry them, turn the ball over. And the other one has been, especially this season with some of the goals we scored before like Kairat and whatever, is pieces of magic. You think about some of the goals Kyogo scored against them in matches, you know, like those games, you take those magic goals away from them. It's what happened at the weekend. It was boring. You know, some of these games were really tough and really minging, but Kyogo could score from the edge of the box, or the breakaway could happen, and you know, we could make things happen. So that team didn't force any errors, didn't try and turn the ball over, and nobody in the team had a bit of magic on them to get, to use the old expression, get you out of jail on it, sort of thing. So in terms of the front three, yeah, I'm a wee bit, I don't know why it doesn't really kick off that way. I think Brendan's he's probably been proven right now for everything he's been saying with the signing and the Gren, because everyone thought when the Gren came in, oh, this is the Kuhn replacement. He's been playing wing in Denmark. That's where he probably will play. And Brendan's like, no, this guy's a midfielder. And I think you see him in his fullness as a winger at the weekend there. And like, yeah, he can be out there, but he's not the winger we need. He's not the winger we want necessarily.
Well, with Nygren, I've got that noted in relation to how effective he has been playing in the midfield compared to yesterday, where I just felt he was wasted out in the wing. And I think if there was ever a decision to be made on where he plays his football, it's definitely yesterday, because he was ineffective. I know that we did it mainly through necessity, Quinny, because of the problems that we're going to be discussing all the way through this show. But Nygren is a decent player. He started off really, really well. I was looking forward to seeing him against Rangers and carving them open and being that creative force. We had our fan zone, our Acsom fan zone yesterday at Barras Art and Design. It was absolutely mobbed inside and out. So we were in the main arena plus the backyard. Must have been between 350 and 400 at the fan zone. So thanks everybody for turning up. But when you get to that point, Quinny, in the second half, and people are saying, what we'll do, you're actually saying we're waiting for a bit of magic or for someone to make a mistake. And this is what we were kind of relying on. And I'm thinking, right, how do you pick the lock? I've said this before with these games. If I'm going to a fan zone or if I'm at the game, I need to watch the game back in the morning to try and get my head wrapped around exactly what went wrong, what went right. I was seeing a lot of stuff last night that Liam Scales was poor, that he had a nightmare, all this stuff. Liam Scales was the best player on our park for us. I mean, the way that he defended, I know there was a few stray passes. He tried to break the lines with some, distance passes, Quinny, and it didn't quite come off, right? So I get that. He was trying to bring Balikwisha into the game a couple of times. The ball didn't get through the packed kind of midfield area. That's fine. But if that's what you're focusing on, then I would say watch it back. You look how many times he intercepts the ball, how many headers he wins, how many tackles he wins. For me, he was our best player. Why is he the go-to guy, the default choice of getting stick, Quinny?
I think if anyone is still hitting Liam Scales at this point with that pattern, that they've just got it in for him, or it's just their go-to thing, where I've got some friends that sound like broken records on any particular topic, depending on what it is you want to talk about. And with some people, they're maybe just that's just them and Liam Scales, because again, like I'll always just try and highlight, which is why it always puts me in the pro Scales camp. But like, to get someone that is better than him, they're not really asking for too much, but the thing you are asking for is pretty high level, because you're asking for someone to do everything that happened at the weekend, but then, like you say, Paul, actually cut a team open with a long ball or slide a winger in behind the defence. Like a centre-back to do that's a pretty big attribute, That's not just run-of-the-mill basic defending or anything, So, it's good to see, it's good to hear that from yourself. Certainly, I've seen the same things as well with Tony Ralston, which I know is your favourite player, but again, like Tony Ralston, who do you want as backup right back? Really, it's all got to be in proportion. The guy's playing. I seen the clip of the Kairat game. He was chewing painkillers in extra time. Didn't train on Friday, and then played the. So everything's got to be balanced and in context. I think the defense. Roger said it. Everyone said it's only positive, but the defense, like nobody was scoring against us. They for as bad as we were, they weren't getting shots away either. They weren't creating too much. But they did seem to travel through the pitch in numbers well, and like if we were able to do that, we'd have probably won the game, but we couldn't ever get in numbers. I was saying to somebody, I can't remember who it was, it kind of ties into the Nygren stuff or whatever, like the wings weren't great or whatever, but there was a moment in the first half and it really stuck with me. I put it in my analysis, but like we get across the halfway line with, I think, Hatate, and then he gives the ball to McGregor. I don't know if you remember this, having watched it this morning. But Balikwisha then just kind of walks inside. He just comes off the line and he kind of walks into the crowd. And McGregor can kind of see him. McGregor's on the ball. McGregor plays it out to Tierney or Scales. And he's like that to Balikwisha, like, get back out the line. Like, get out the crowd. Get back out there. And Balikwisha was put out there all by himself the whole game. He could have done a little bit better with the one or two times he was on the ball. But Tierney never went by him. And once or twice maybe Maeda went out there. Once or twice Hatate maybe went out there. But nothing ever really stuck or played off. Balikwisha has been, if you look at his Antwerp season this season, he's been playing in the Gren role. He's been playing that I'm a centre midfielder, but I'll roam into the wide areas and I'll kind of go around the place. And you can see that natural tendency in the match in that moment, and maybe another one later on, where he's trying to come in and get on the ball, and the system and the dogma of this is the shape and this is the way we play is like, no, get out there. And in those moments, like, to use it, you need to sacrifice a piece at one point. Yeah, you might be leaving Tavernier on the right side for a minute with no one covering him, but we've got the ball, and if he gets the ball, Tavernier's then worrying about him. Tavernier, it's not that's the way it works, So it's just far too passive, actually getting through the lines and actually attacking in that sense. And there's no invention, there's no ability for anyone to And again, that's why I was quite happy Negren was on the wide area, because Negren will just kind of go around and he won't be wide.
Yeah.
And so I can't remember what I started.
And he did that. He started drifting in. I think that point you're making there and watching it, Balikwisha again, I was going to ask you how you think he did in his debut, but he did seem as though he was following a very stringent plan. Like, don't do this, don't go in there. And yesterday when I was watching it, I looked at the Celtic performance and thought everything has to be so precise, Quinny. Everything has to be so precise. Kasper Schmeichel, Callum McGregor and the two centre-halves getting more of the ball than anybody else on the park. Callum McGregor's now in this situation. I've been criticised on here in the past, and I don't mind it, saying, when are you going to bring up Callum McGregor's performances? Well, I personally don't look to protect Callum McGregor. I thought yesterday he was so ineffective. He got loads of the ball, but it's about, and again, going back yesterday to somebody saying, you've never played football, I can see, it's right in front of me. When Callum McGregor collects the pass, he's not in a position, his body shape's not in the right position to then look up and spray a ball down the wing. Every single time he's facing Kasper Schmeichel, right? And he passes it the direction that it came from. So generally speaking, he'll give it back to Scales or Carter Vickers or vice versa, right? It'll end up back with a centre-half. And then so many times yesterday, he's passed it back to Scales and then told Scales the pass that he should be making. And I'm thinking, Callum, you make that pass. You turn on a sixpence and you make that pass. And I don't know the reasons behind it, but I'm starting to think he's becoming less and less effective. Is it the role that he's playing? Because I'm an observer of football and I watch it, right? And I analyse it, Quinny. I don't always have the answer as I can tell you what the problem is, but the coach needs to find the solution to that. Otherwise, we'd all be coaches, right? And it's like, right, I can see this. Why is that happening? And how can we put it right? Is it something to do with Callum McGregor's role in the team at the moment? Is he a number 6? Because I don't see physicality from him. I don't see creativity from him. And I don't think that he is affecting games the way that our captain needs to affect a game like yesterday.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you. I don't have to protect McGregor or anything, but McGregor's one of my favourite players ever, so I just kind of hold him, I think, to a bit of a higher standard, because when you see him playing in that deeper role, and he's done it for a few years now. I remember when he first went in there, you're thinking, oh, brilliant. Imagine Scott Brown or Neil Lennon had a range of passing. This should be amazing, and over the years, that has just not happened, less and less and less. I know he had a great year last year with scoring goals or whatever, because he finally got let off the leash a little bit or found himself with some room to, just appear on the edge of the box a bit more often than a couple of years prior to that. But it's really hard to answer that, because I would have said it comes from the manager, right? But if you listen to the manager's post-match comments yesterday, he says, my team doesn't pass backwards and sidewards. The players didn't do enough. The players didn't, have that invention in the game. They didn't try and cut through the middle. And he's never spoke like that. I was quite taken aback with the whole post-match spiel from Brendan. It was very different on all topics to what's went over the months and weeks prior. So I would have said the manager, but the manager, if you take him at face value, is firmly saying it's McGregor. I described McGregor in my post-match breakdown as being like a broken robot, where it's like he's just got he can do the one or two actions, but the other ones are, they're not, taking the ball in the half turn rather than playing centre back or full back, play with Hatate, have a wee, actually link up with the midfield, and try and work it around that way. But if it is, so I don't believe Rodgers for a start, because I think if it was the case, he would have subbed McGregor, because Bernardo was on the bench, right? And if he's saying my team doesn't do this and you're not, because the way I look at the team now is, some managers are like the jockey riding the horse. They're really controlling the tempo, steering it, everything. Brendan Rodgers and some managers aren't jockeys. They're like the trainer or whatever. And then it's, in our case, it's McGregor. McGregor's the jockey. McGregor's the one that's whipping the horse, pulling the direction of it and pulling it. So if Brendan really did believe that, he'd have changed the jockey. He'd have been like, McGregor, you're off at the day, or you're not turning round. Bernardo, go on and prove a point. So I don't believe Rodgers. So I think it's the system. And I think the Balakwisha point you made ties into that as well. And it comes down to the whole, like, yeah, McGregor's brilliant. We all love him. There's no one going to say any different. But that is not the position to make him in the team, you know, like, as you know, and the congestion you've got, the bottleneck you've got is that Hitate's been here for 4 years and been in McGregor's position. Really, that's really where McGregor should have been this whole time. And again, we've had lots of discussions on his legs and if he can do stuff on this channel, like a bunch of times. And he showed last year, like, hey, like he can still run around the pitch. You know, he's not past it. But so I think he's been a square peg in a round hole for too long. And now those edges are just totally misshapen. He's not a square peg or a round peg anymore. He's just a peg.
I get what you mean. And the thing is, last season, when you're looking at the moments, Quinny, where Callum McGregor became a match winner, dragging us back into games, he was picking the ball up in the final third. He was finding a bit of pocket of space, and he was striking for distance, something we're not seeing enough of, particularly when we're playing against congested defences. The precise comment that I make, people often look at that and say, oh, you know, you're a dinosaur if you think that, you know, you can't play a precise system and this kind of thing. I've heard from managers who are no longer in the game talking about it and analysing the modern game, Quinny, and they say that in actual fact, I think sometimes that you're painting yourself into a wee bit of a corner with that, because one of the moments, right, and we'll get on to Don Robertson at some point, but one of the moments was when Balakwisha manages to get in behind Tavernier and Robertson, for some reason, finds a foul. And I don't know what the foul was, right? I mean, Tavernier falls over. Balakwisha's basically, it could be virtually one-on-one with Butland, and he's pulled back, and it was just a really, really bizarre decision. But if you watch that move, that comes from Schmeichel, right? So Celtic are pinned back, right? And Rangers have got everything in the final third. Schmeichel gets the ball and does the quick throw to Engles, who plays the first-time pass over the top. Seriously, so direct, counter-attacking football, Quinny. And it was one of those moments where you thought, we just about got them there. And if Robertson hadn't pulled that back, that was a chance for Celtic. And what was it? It was a long throw-in for Kasper Schmeichel to Engles, who played the first-time pass. That's just direct football, thinking on your feet. I mean, that's not even something that you need to talk about. That should just be instinctive within football. But I just feel as though we're trained to the nth degree not to do anything that might result in you losing possession. You know, and when you look at that pass for Engles, great pass by Engles, and Balakwisha very, very unlucky because of the refereeing situation. So sometimes I just wish we could express ourselves. I always go back to that interview where Gary Neville, love him or loathe him, he's speaking to Alex Ferguson, and Ferguson talks about, you know, sometimes rip it up. If you're not finding a way, rip it up and just cause a bit of chaos in the box. And we just don't do that. It's just too precise for me. Is that coming for the manager as well, do you think, Quinny?
I think so, because Brendan's like the possession-based manager. You see, you know, it's that thing's kind of evolved over the years, but it is born on do not lose the ball, move the ball quick, 1-2 touch, don't let your opposition set, try and, you know, move them from side to side, and then you'll get someone that makes a mistake, take their space and then go for it from there. And again, like Brendan and managers like Brendan are very dependent on high quality attackers because they don't really coach the actual attacking part that much. It's about, we're going to put you in a position where we're going to be on the edge of the box or in and around it. You'll have players to cover you defensively. You'll have players to support you in the attacking sense. And once we've built it up and once we've got into a position where everyone's happy, do your thing. Unlock the defense, go for it, and you figure it out. You know, see who's the weak one, see who's got the run of, play the ball you fancy, kind of go for it. And we don't have these like determined kind of routes to go where even if you have poorer players, you still, like, this is how we're going to create space. You know, we're going to, on the switch of play stuff, like we all know Brendan likes to talk about. Again, there was a good example of it in the game. You might remember it if you've watched it this morning again, sorry. But Engles is on the left-hand side of the pitch. He's with Hatate, he's with Balakwisha. Don't know where Tierney is, but they're all over on that side of the pitch where Tavernier is. And from there, you think, once we've got like Engles and Tatati in that little space. You then are bringing the whole Rangers team into that space in terms of their midfield and everything as well. And from there, if you can switch a play over 2 passes, you've then got the freedom of the other side of the pitch to play a ball into and try and get players running off it. But we never even when we set that situation up, we'd never execute it because it just can't be worked on quite seriously. It's all, the only thing you could see that's brought from the training ground is build-up play. There's no attacking play. There's no route to goal. There's no, this is how we score goals. That, you know, like, as fans, we watch the team as much as the coaches, and in some cases, maybe some people feel more. And if you were to say, what type of goals does Celtic score right now? You know, like, who would have an answer for that? You know,
that's really tough. That's tough because you can define that when you're looking through various other managerial periods and tenures. I always go back to Brendan's first period in charge, and he had a lot of players, Quinny, if you look at it, who could actually score from distance. When you think about even Dembele, Lee Griffiths, Stuart Armstrong, Paddy Roberts, these guys were scoring, Tommy Rogic, these guys were scoring a lot of goals over a period of a season where there's no chance. You're creating your own chance and you're striking from distance. We're not doing stuff like that. You know, it's very, very difficult. You've then got other managers who, you know, a staple part of their style and their identity was that you did have the winger and the fullback working together, whereas one of them would overlap, hit the byline and get the ball across. We don't do that. We also don't do that. So you're right. It's about identity, isn't it? Where you're thinking, what type of goal does this team score? Well, it's very, very difficult to pin that down. I'm keen to get as many people in as possible. In terms of Callum McGregor, I think what we need to do, there's a few people bringing it up here. I'm going to bring Johnny Boy into the conversation on the YouTube. Is it time for a conversation about McGregor? Yes, I think it is. Or is he the victim to contact his Rodgers? I think partly both of those things, Johnny. And the key now is I don't think this is an area, Quinny, that we're expecting to strengthen in this window because there's other priority areas. So what do you do in the meantime? Is McGregor going to be an asset somewhere else on the park? Do we have someone who can come in and do that defensive midfielder's job better? Was Lennon Miller the guy? I mean, we spoke about that. I mean, if you just look at his performances for Motherwell, a third of the games he played for Motherwell was as a defensive mid. Was he the guy to bring in? Because a lot of people say, well, you know, he didn't want to come to Celtic. Him and his dad have made that clear. He got his move to Italy because that's where he wanted to go. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about an interview with Mark Guidi, very well connected in Scottish football. He was talking on the Go Radio show. And he said that in January, Rodgers was desperate to sign Lennon Miller. So, I mean, have we missed out there? Because we're not in the market now, Quinny, for a defensive mid, I don't think.
No, I don't think we are either. I think there was chat of it until the whole Ida, because I don't think we were really planning on selling Ida this window, and that just kind of happened really quickly. But there was some quiet chat around a midfielder until these developments of the last 2 or 3 days or whatever it's kind of kicked in. I like Lennon Miller. I'd have loved us to have signed him, but I just don't think it was the right time or the right place or anything. I think the only window to sign him, and, you know, pardon the pun, is when we sold O'Reilly. Because if you sell O'Reilly and you sign Miller and you say you're going to come in and fill his boots, it's a wee bit biscuit tin. We also want to see the club moving on. I don't think all fans would have really got behind that. It's kind of maybe old Celtic, but I don't think a guy like that is. And again, you see this with a lot of players, and it's part of the worry you have when you're building your squad out is guys don't want to come and fight for minutes and be second string. Like, they don't want to come and have it handed to them. There's a wee bit of recognition of you'll have competition in the squad, but players don't want to sign for teams. And how many centre backs have you got? You've already got 4, right? Okay, so why am I signing? You know, to be number 5? It doesn't feel like it's going to be a great time for me. So I think that's the hard part. And when you see, like, Balikwisha needed convinced before signing, I said that was a bit of a positive myself, because, you know, like, I would need convinced to sign for Celtic at this point, I think. And Dahlberg, it feels like the negotiations are quite protracted down to whatever reason. But if you're going to try and sign that next McGregor player, all they're going to do is look at the squad and see he's the first name on the team sheet and he plays that position. So it'll be like, well, when am I going to play? And it makes it quite hard to actually fill that. Whereas there's no kind of movability where McGregor could play in a different role. With Lennon Miller, like I said, in terms of the defensive midfield thing, that might come out of him a bit more when he's in Italy. When I seen him at Motherwell, which was not too often, to be quite honest with you, I would see him much more in that attacking spot, you know, going towards defences, similar to your O'Reilly, Negren kind of position or whatever.
I look at the fact that we're not in the market for that type of player, and I think to myself, well, we're going to have to make do with what we've got, and who will be the player if indeed Callum McGregor is moved elsewhere, who has got it in them to play that role. And you mentioned Bernardo before. He's the much seldom seen actually this season. He's not had much in the way of minutes. He's done pretty well in the past against Rangers. He didn't feature at the weekend. And I just think that a player like Bernardo is probably stagnating now, sitting on the bench. Can he do a job defensive mid? I look at Arnie Engles, and I know, when you look at his game time, not just when he's come to Celtic, but in his previous career as well, he's not naturally played that role. What is his role? Because I was looking at it at the weekend, and he's a guy I've stood up for a year. And I watched it back this morning with interest because I'm thinking, right, again, last night I seen him getting a lot of stick. I seen him and Scales getting a lot of stick. And I was thinking to myself, did he play such a bad game? Well, I'll tell you this much. He doesn't command the game enough for me, Quinny. He certainly doesn't grab a game and command it and orchestrate it and orchestrate the pace of the game. I've kept saying that he needs to have more aggression about his game. That doesn't mean to say you give away free kicks. It's almost as if he's been told to be aggressive and he thinks that means just be dirty. Aggression is different. It absolutely is. I'm not quite sure what his best role is either. So we've now gone from a situation where you're looking at midfield going, oh, well, we're well covered there. We've got McCowan, Bernardo and Engles. We've got Rio and Nigren and McGregor. Oh, we've got to pick 3 from 6. That's great. I'm not sure what our strongest midfield is. I don't know who plays the number 6, and I don't know what the best role for Engles is. What was your take on Engles' performance?
I actually think Engles did all right at the weekend, as much as any Celtic player did all right. I don't think anyone did great or pass marks or anything like that. But I thought Engles should have stayed on the pitch and Hatate should have been subbed off when that happened. I thought Hatate was doing less than nothing in the game. I think he did more after the subs happened when Negren came into midfield with him. But at that point, I think Engles has started the season with he's also become off the bench and whatever. But I've quite liked the kind of energy he's brought to the games when he's came off the bench. And like you, I would kind of agree. He didn't really grab the game at all ever, but he was everywhere. He really went all over the pitch. And my main criticism has often been that you don't even really know where he is on the pitch sometimes. He's just vanished. Is he even playing? Are we down to 10 men? And, so he had less of that, which, is a positive. But I think you're starting to see little bits of, that player who, you're talking about the time where he breaks out and he plays Balikwisha, and he tried to play Balikwisha 1 or 2 times. You can tell they've got a bit of a link up. Maybe I think they've played youth football together for Belgium. So he's also got a bit of a connection there. He's maybe comfortable linking up with him, as it were. And I think Engles is showing he could be a very good midfielder for us at getting out of defence and long diagonals from left to right or raking balls to the middle. We've seen glimpses of it in the past. But it's not normally been coupled up with a high energy performance where he's kind of went around the pitch and he's bumping shoulders. He gave away too many fouls, didn't win enough fouls.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you say, he didn't really dominate the ball ever and went, I'm going by you and I'm going to play it here. Maybe once, but not often. But I think he's actually improving. I don't think there's huge improvements or anything, but I think Engles, where he's at right now, is one or two really good performances away from breaking through of becoming the player he's meant to become at us at this stage. I think he's going in the right direction, and he's just the first couple of games he's been desperate to score. He's hanging on the edge of the box. He's begging for cutbacks, for tap-ins, and they've not quite came for him. And maybe a wee cheap one like that would get him the confidence he needs. But I think if he has 1 or 2 big games after this international break, domestically or in Europe, I think I think he's set to come good.
Kick on. And from that period where we signed 3 players for £26 million, taking the Matt O'Reilly money and reinvesting it, we might face a situation where Engles is the only one left. I mean, he does on his way out. Trusty's disappeared. Obviously, he's got injury concerns, but he wasn't being fancied by Brendan Rodgers at the beginning of the campaign. So Engles could be that guy that's the sole survivor from that £26 million shell out. I hear this morning Matt O'Reilly is on his way to Marseille as well, Quinny.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think he'll do great there. The chat's coming after me for being somewhat, and I would say, take what I've said as just above neutral. I'm not going, oh, Engles is brilliant, he's going to change the game and all that kind of stuff. But I think he started the season a lot better than what he showed in periods last season, just in terms of energy and a little bit of desire. And I'll stand by it. 1 or 2 good games for him, and I think he totally changes. But as I say, just what I've said, I'm a little bit above neutral. I'm not super positive and like, oh, he's done great at the weekend and everyone's wrong or whatever. But there's little green shoots there.
Well, listen, see the thing with Engles, I really am willing to do well because, last season, and I've argued the toss about this time and time again, I think over the piece, he had a decent first campaign at Celtic. Whether or not he's, an £11 million player, you said it before, that's an abstract figure. Now, what I'm saying though is you think a defensive mid and you think, well, a defensive mid, is it the guy, is it the Roy Keane type, that type of player that's just, scrapping and winning and bullying and keeping, protecting your team and all this kind of stuff? Or it's Celtic, is it the guy that's taking the ball from the central midfield defensive area and pinging that cross-field diagonal pass? Because he's very good at that. He really is. I mean, there was another one yesterday, Quinny, where he almost found Maeda. He almost got in behind the Rangers back line. And, you're talking half a yard to the left, or if the wind just caught it ever so slightly, it's dropping to Maeda. 1-on-1, I'm not sure what Maeda would have done with it this season. But the intent was there. So when we say defensive mid, we've got to remember the role of the defensive midfielder at Celtic isn't that snarling, Roy Keane type player. It's someone who is still a creative type, someone who can find a pass in behind the back line and all this kind of stuff. And Engles is very good at that. I don't know if we'll deploy him there. But I want to talk about that. I mentioned Matt O'Reilly, the 26 million quid, all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking at where we are here in this window. Now, in terms of budgeting, and this isn't just an opinion, you've just got to look at what we have brought in, what we have shelled out over a period of time. And we always talk about, hitting net zero spend or we're in profit, right? And I look at it from that perspective and I think to myself, any other business, not just football, but any other business looks at this scenario and think, well, what's the most important thing? Quality on the park, right? So recruitment's massive. Recruitment's massive for every company. But why do we ring fence what we bring in against what we spend? Surely that budget should be set based on the income of the entirety of Celtic Football Club, not just, all right, we brought this money in and that's your budget. I don't think that's the way to go. So I was having a wee look at this and I'm thinking, right, we ring fence the money and we spend the money that we bring in. It's almost as if it's a completely different department. You have just got to make your own money to bring in the quality. So on sell loans alone in this period, you're talking Frimpong, Ben Doak, who's gone for about 50 million quid or something. And I was expecting Matt O'Reilly to believe in that he's gone on loan, so you're not going to get a sell on there. But you actually pointed out yesterday to me that Chris Ayer could be on the move, and there could be a. Anyway, when you're looking at that, we could be in the process of bringing in £10 million just on sign-ons, just on sell-ons rather, right? Then Ida and Yang are expected to leave the building at some point today. There's another 10 million quid. We've already brought in roughly 22 million for Kuhn and all the other guys that have gone, Telio, Lagerbielk, all this kind of thing. And we've only spent 8 million quid. So at the moment, you're looking at £34 million up, right? And apparently we need 4 players coming in, but only 2 of them apparently are coming in permanently. So the other 2 will be loans. And you think to yourself, we're going to end up to the tune of about £20 million in profit here. Oh, look, that's how much we lost by not competing in the Champions League this season. And you think to yourself, really? Do we really need to make that shortfall up, Quinny, through a transfer window when you're sitting with all that money in the bank? 80, 90, who knows how much is in there, right? But there's a lot of money. It's a Scrooge McDuck safe, you know what I mean? You can go swimming in that dough. It's that scene in Breaking Bad when the big guy's just sitting on the money, you know what I mean? That's Peter Lillo and Dermot Desmond right now. But why ring fence the transfer cash? Why not have a budget and a kitty so that it doesn't really hinge on us bringing all that money in that I've just listed there? Because that for me is an astonishing amount of money for a Scottish football club to bring in one window, right? Incredible. Yeah, kudos to everybody that got the sell-ons and all this kind of stuff. Brilliant business. We're good at selling players. But in terms of bringing 4 guys in, we're hearing that a couple of them are going to be loan deals. We've got Raksaki from Crystal Palace. That's looking to be a loan deal. And you think to yourself, the other unnamed player could well be a short-term deal. So we're not going to be going out and buying 2 players for 10 million. Rodgers has already poured scorn on a wee bit of that. We might bring in one striker at 10, and who knows who else is going to come in and how much they're going to cost us. We've seen the names. Tuneke, for example, might be coming in. So in relation to that, is it a case, Quinny, where we need to change our strategy when it comes to signing players? We really don't need to be bringing in 44 million quid in one window.
No, I think, well, I totally agree with you, but at the same time, I would say, like, there's nothing wrong with, I think, the transfer department being as self-sustaining as possible, you know, where you are moneyballing it. But I think it shouldn't be at the detriment of doing business, you know, like the bank balance and all the other revenue the club has should liquidate, you know, lubricate the business. So, like, we don't need to, like the O'Reilly thing and the Engles thing, you know, O'Reilly's going to go. Don't wait for the check to clear before spending the money. Spend the money and get the other guy in, and then, you know, the check's in the post. It will balance out by the time the bloody thing clears or whatever. So I think that's it feels far too rigid on until the check's cleared, we're no spending it, you know, whereas in bank account number 2 or the main bank account or whatever from this little pot, it's spilling out the edges, you know, there's plenty sitting there you could use just to, as I say, just lubricate the wheels of the machine a little bit, you know, just get things in motion and it'll come back around. Don't worry, it'll be there.
Be that first
Whether
domino, be the first domino to drop. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rather than wait.
So I do agree that there should be a much more kind of forward-thinking approach with how to do it, but I'm not against the transfer department by and large, like washing its own face and trying to make money, because at the end of the day, like that's how the club will continue to grow its bank balance as well as Champions League football and whatever. But I was talking to somebody about the O thing as well. I forget what it was in a group chat somewhere, but I think it might have been the Acsom one. But the thing with the O one is really kind of funny, isn't it? Because there's a few things that play with that. Like, because like I've seen people like, it's never a 28 million euro striker. I've seen him play and just, what the hell's going on? And the world is going mad. And there's probably a fair bit of that that's quite true, right? But what that really should highlight to Celtic is Celtic. Let's imagine we kept I've always said Adam Ida was the O replacement. So let's just imagine we kept and we didn't sign Ida and we played this entire time. He scored 20 goals last season, and let's imagine he scored 5 goals this year. We're not going to sell him to Stuttgart for 28 million euros. Stuttgart are not going to scout their replacement for 80 million striker that they've just sold to Newcastle from Scotland, but they will scout Belgium and Holland and all these other places. So there's a little bit of that where, you know, like it's just circumstantial. Belgian clubs are really good. It seems that getting these players into these bigger leagues and getting good transfer fees. And the way we're operating, you mentioned the reputation thing earlier. We're not getting the reputation. We're not building links with clubs in other leagues around the world where that could be a future of ours. I don't think, you know, it feels like we are that annoying team. Like, we've got a bid from Celtic. All right, what have they offered? Half. Oh, surprise, surprise. You know,
I know. Don't even respond to them. Aye.
Yeah.
A fax has just came in for a fax from Celtic. Wow. No, we're going to get on to some of the targets because I know you're always got your finger on the pulse. I don't know about you, but when we're doing these shows, I've always got Celtic News Now open because this is the news aggregator which gives you all the stories that are linked to Celtic coming through. And at this moment in time, it is so busy that the server's actually struggling to keep up with it because I think half the globe is on Celtic News Now, refreshing it for transfer news. So if anything comes through, let us know in the comment section, or Quinny might have something open as well. Celtic News Now actually is so busy, you can't get onto it. That's incredible. James Kerwin comes in. You're on the YouTube. Great to see you, James. 8 months, then he comes in the door 2 days before we play our first derby of the season. And they sign a player which we talked about on here for months. Yeah, and he obviously endeared himself to the Ibrox faithful when he was blessing himself walking off the park as well. Jungle Lion, Lennon joins Petrov sticking up for the hierarchy. Sutton was right. He's only making excuses. All afraid of their lives to rock the boat. Listen, I actually found this quite an interesting one, right? Obviously, we do a wee bit with Chris Sutton on the live kind of circuit and stuff like that. And what I love about Chris Sutton is that he is just honest. So when he says something about Celtic, he's not thinking in the back of his mind, all right, what about my privileges up there? What about, whether or not I'm going to be on the naughty step, like Jackie McNamara's on the naughty step or whatever, right? Because it has happened in the past, Quinny. Chris Sutton's just brutally honest, and I don't think he's doing it for clicks. I don't think he's doing it to be a caricature like some people in the media do. They just play a part, don't they? Chris Sutton yesterday, I felt, and maybe this is because he's confirming my own thoughts. I'm also well aware of that because I share his opinion. I'm thinking that he's right. But, recently we've heard the Petrov thing, or, I can't say what I want to say, or they'll not let me back in up there. You've got Neil Lennon, who's obviously, still someone who is got connections with Peter Lawwell, Dermot Desmond, etc. And Chris Sutton, it felt to me as if it was Chris Sutton against the world yesterday, shouting from the abyss, trying to get the point across. And I'm thinking to myself, Sutty's spot on yesterday. And let's stop making excuses. Let's stop saying that Celtic, we're the only car. It's hard to do business in a transfer window. Is it? Maybe it's because you're incompetent at doing it. Maybe it's because you're not building these relationships, Quinny, that when somebody sees that Celtic are in for your player, you're actually going, no, I can't be done with this. This is going to be tedious, almost as tedious as a performance yesterday. I don't know if you've seen the back and forward between Lennon and Sutton, but I mean, I was 100% in Sutty's camp, personally.
Yeah, same. I thought it was quite revealing, some of the stuff Lennon said as well, because obviously he's been in the chair, he's had those conversations, so like little things he slips out, they've came from experience, real world. Actually, he's lived that life. He's not just like an ex-football manager of St Mirren or Hibs or whatever. He's actually been Celtic manager. He actually knows the people, the decisions they make, the thoughts they think, the processes they go through. And he mentioned the window where he lost like Wilson and Hooper and somebody else, and how we were weaker and all the rest of it. And I was sitting there thinking, I don't know how you can highlight that and then still not say it's mad how things haven't changed, because even at that stage, we weren't playing with the same scale, because like Wilson and Hooper, we got both of them from lower reaches of England, and we basically gave them back to the lower reaches of England when we were done with them. So we're not talking about Odsonne Edwards and Dembele's and Frimpongs or anything like that. But I think it's quite clear it's very much ingrained inside, isn't it? And Chris Sutton, like you say, like I think he's got a wee bit of a character in him, but he definitely like starts from his first thought, doesn't he? He definitely starts from like, what is my honest interpretation of this? And then he's very aware he's on camera, I think, after that. But it starts with something he knows he can die on a hill with, what he actually thinks and feels. And it's a difficult one, because when he is in that conversation, the real conversation at the time is it the board's fault, or is it the players and Rodgers' fault for Kairat and not getting to the Champions League? And Lennon says Scotland is a tough sell without Champions League. And you know what? With the greatest respect, Neil Lennon, I'd call him a modern day hero, modern day icon, legend, whatever word you want to use for Celtic, player, manager, trebles, doubles, all that stuff. I'm sure it is really hard for Neil Lennon to convince players to come to Glasgow. It should be a damn sight less hard for Brendan Rodgers to convince players to come to Celtic. And that's one of the real disconnects that I think that we've all quietly felt in the transfer window, is he's not involved, he's not connected, he doesn't know what's going on. And I remember when we've signed players under Ange, I got a call from the manager.
Yep.
And he told me where I'm going to fit into the team, and I knew. I remember, although Matt O'Reilly and Ange kind of ended a bit sour from the comments O'Reilly made when Brendan came in. When O'Reilly first signed, O'Reilly was like, he's watched my videos, he really knows my game, he knows where I'm going to fit into the team, and I came to Celtic anyway. But wow, the manager really made that an easy decision to make, essentially. So yeah, I'm sure it was hard for Neil Lennon to convince players to come to Celtic when Champions League wasn't always guaranteed. But Brendan Rodgers should be the difference. Should be like, listen, we've got one playoff to do. I'm Brendan Rodgers. We're Celtic. You're signing. We'll deal with it. And it shouldn't be as hard. There's one thing I thought from that as well.
That's an outstanding point that you make there, and that is quite worrying that Brendan Rodgers has been on the periphery of this process, isn't it? Now we know modern football doesn't mean that every single player that comes into a football club is identified and all the rest of it by the manager. You need a department in the modern age with regards to all the different markets that you're scouring to try and get value for money, as Celtic always try to do. But in terms of that, that final bit, because Ange Postecoglou spoke to Joe Hart, and Joe Hart has also discussed that conversation that he had. Celtic had spoken to Joe Hart 12 months before, and it wasn't a deal that he wanted to do 12 months before, but Ange Postecoglou speaks to him, and it happens. Ange also spoke to Paddy Roberts about Brick, because obviously we've got a great scouting team. We didn't just go back through the previous reports. He spoke to Paddy Roberts, and he decided that Paddy Roberts didn't show enough in that conversation that he was going to be the guy for him. So it flipped completely differently in that case. So Brendan Rodgers, when you're looking at, right, what was that Brendan Rodgers and Lewis Palmer conversation? Did it even happen? Probably not. right? Because it's about attitude, isn't it? About application. It's about selling the dream of what we're doing. This is my vision. And like you say, look, we've got Kazakhstan team in the qualifiers, but this is my plan, and you're going to be a big part of that plan. You're going to come to this football club. And if he's not as in that kind of position as he should be, then why, Quinny? Because this is a manager with profile. The English Premiership, love it or loathe it, is, it's box office. Brendan Rodgers was a manager at Liverpool. He's well known, well renowned. And like you say, you're then tapping into markets where they want to eventually get to that Premiership. How can you sell that dream? Well, the manager who's managed there and almost won a league there, he can sell you that dream. So is he part of the process? And if not, why not? I think that's a great point, and it's a massive issue. And I do also see an issue with our left back. I want to point this out as well before we get to some of the names in the transfer window. Well, we're going to be back because Jungle Lion requested it. We're going to be back at 10 o'clock tonight. But in relation to the left back, right? So Kieran Tierney can't finish a game of football yet. The way that Brendan Rodgers is answering the questions that are surrounding that situation is that this was always part of the plan. We are going to decide when the time is right because of his previous injury issues, the lack of game time, etc. We'll know when the time's right to play Kieran Tierney 90 minutes, a couple of times a week, if that ever happens. And it should at 27, you would hope. But my bigger concern is where we're going with it. And by the way, don't take this the wrong way. This is not me having a go at Sriracha here, right? But where are we going with the backup? We've gone from Baye to Schlupp to Sriracha. Every single one of them, short-termism. Absolute short-termism. You're just putting a sticky plaster on it. And in the meantime, none of the players become Celtic players, Quinny. And nobody from within is progressing at Celtic because you're bringing in these just stopgaps. In the same week that a left back called Mitchell Frame, who played for Celtic in the Champions League, leaves for Aberdeen. And I'm not saying he would have been the answer, by the way, but it's the short-termism of it that I think needs to be questioned. Why are we unable to identify a backup who comes into Celtic as a Celtic player, is going to give us value whilst he's here, and might even be sold for a profit? None of these guys are. It's bizarre that we're at that stage as well, I think.
Yeah, and by all accounts, Boca Juniors phoned us. It was some of the reports I read. Boca Juniors were the ones that were shopping Sriracha around, and good work, Boca Juniors. They worked out we needed a backup left back, and they had a guy that was really happy to be a backup left back. I don't mind it on an individual basis, like Sriracha, and this was always going to be the trade-off with Tierney. Rodgers said it was always a plan. I think we all know it was inevitable. You need a decent left back to cover for Tierney because he just won't play every game. He won't play 90 minutes very often. And it basically just makes the Greg Taylor thing a bit more maddening, because if you are going to roll the dice and take these risks in other areas of the transfer market, just pay him the extra couple of quid he wanted or whatever. Because, again, I was on the record at the time of saying Greg Taylor at his best for us was our best attacking midfielder, and you think about what was flat and what was missing at the weekend, it was maybe Greg Taylor, in a weird way, and that's not like shade on Tierney. It's just that Taylor was attacking midfield for us quite often, and was that random overload player that would just put defenders in two minds, buy a yard of space for somebody else. Maybe he was on the ball, maybe he would cross the ball, but not all, but just that position he would take up or whatever. So I think that's the most frustrating thing. So again, when we're talking about this, what is the ideal thing? The ideal thing is you've got a left-sided Ralston. You've got a guy who's happy, that knows their role, would die for the club, isn't going to make up a fuss, doesn't cost too much money. Yeah, maybe if you want to have them as a guy you can sell, there's an advantage to that, fine. But I think in an ideal world, you've got someone that's low maintenance, easy, reliable, and can plug and play. And we've just not made a left back one of them, sadly. So in absence of that, I don't mind individually a guy like Sriracha coming in. But it's the same as the goalkeeper problem that we've been kicking down the road for the last 4 years. The time will come where an actual move will need to be made, a plan will have to be executed. And it just doesn't ever feel like there's any plan getting put together for these obvious situations.
No, there isn't. There absolutely isn't. And by the way, I don't think either of the two of us are sitting here saying if Taylor was still at the club, he's a player that becomes a better player because he's not here. We spoke about this at the time. And we said that the best outcome would be that we bring Tierney in and keep Taylor. And Brendan Rodgers constantly was asked the question about Greg Taylor's future, Quinny, and always maintained that he wanted him to stay at the football club. And I think that my view on this is, yeah, they're loans, but there's a loan fee for a player, right? And we've now had three. One of them from down south, one of them from Barcelona, and now one for Boca Juniors. We've had 3 loanees to plug that gap, right, to fill that hole. Would it not have been better just keeping Greg Taylor? That by the way, you know, and when you look at the wages as well, and you think, right, what was he asking for? Would that have equated for the entirety of his contract to the loan fees that we paid for 3 different left backs? I just think there's a short-termism here, and it's going against what the manager wanted as well, Quinny.
Yeah. Anyone that doesn't think Greg Taylor wouldn't be a quality backup left back for Celtic is just not being true to themselves for what they've seen. Taylor, not perfect. I'm seeing people saying he's a bench warmer now in Greece, and I don't think that was a good move for him. It's sorry to see that he's not walked into the team after he's left us or whatever. But there's no two ways about he would be one of the best possible backups we could have at left back. The same way, on balance of everything, reliability, die for the team, all that kind of stuff. Ralston is one of the best backup right backs we could have. You know, there's not too many more that would really come into the reckoning to do the backup shift as wholeheartedly and as committed as Taylor on the contract he asked for and Ralston on the one we've got now. So I think that's the most frustrating part of the Tierney thing is if you are going to marry yourself to the Tierney move, then just insure it. Just get the insurance policy on it. You know, just get someone that, yeah, having Taylor still to cover for Tierney definitely doesn't move us forward, keeps us where we've been. And we've seen the inefficiencies with that in big games. I get the fear of that returning, you know, if Tierney was out of Champions League games or Europa League or derbies or whatever, fine. But it's backups, you know, how good do you expect your backup to be? And how often have backups let us down in the past? It's just a fact of life. The number 2 guy is not as good as the number 1 guy. But
yeah. Exactly. And the thing about that, Quinny, is there's other elements to this. There needs to be an element of the maintenance of that player. So Tony Ralston, he's very low maintenance. He's not expecting to be a number 1 right back, right? But he's got that muscle memory, I think you could call it, with regards to, right, this is a Champions League game. He's done that. This is a Rangers game, done that. This is a cup final. He knows what's expected, you know, and Taylor had all that because he had been a success at Celtic. But we move on. We need to move on. The left back that we brought in, Inamura, apparently will be loaned out at some point today. Don't be surprised. Callum Osman's another one that I've heard might be loaned out, as is Stephen Welsh. We're expecting Yang and Ida to be shelled out for £10 million combined. And the names that might be announced at some point today, unless you've heard anything different, Quinny, is Kasper Dolberg. He's the guy. He's the one that you're kind of hoping for because, you know, when you look at his age profile, he's a guy that's already done it. He's got huge experience. He's a goal scorer wherever he's been. Sebastian Tunekte as well. He might be coming in. And we've got Rak Sake, which apparently is a loan deal. William Boving is a player that was reported by Liam Carrigan as well. I don't know if he's maybe one of the backup choices if we can't get the Dolberg deal over the line. What are you expecting today in relation to this, Quinn? Are you expecting all of the names to be in and out by the close of business?
Well, the chat has been shouting at us, and it's on the timeline that Ajax are trying to hijack the Dolberg deal. He's an Ajax Academy graduate, I think. So, you know, maybe that works out for them. They've just sold Brobbey today to Sunderland. But Bovine might be on his way to Mainz or Girona to replace Miovski, funnily enough. Coventry and Ipswich also been linked to him. I seen that link coming out. I forgot what it was. Was it Liam? That's good to know. That meant to give. I didn't know who to credit for that one. So I've got really no idea. I thought Dolberg would have been a tap in, but it looks like we're making a mess of it again. And you know, I was thinking about the show today before coming on, but from where I'm sitting, there's not really a bad situation here. See if the transfer window does blow up in our face, it's probably a net positive for us. Yeah, we'll need to suffer this season being undermanned and a minor kind of uphill struggle with maybe the way things will go this year with just sentiment and the way everything's going right now. But it really, you would hope, be some sort of catalyst, some sort of change for something. And if we do get all the signings in, then we'll be happy. You know, we'll start playing good football again. And Brendan's last year might be worth smiling about eventually. But I think as fans, especially discontent fans, I think we're in a really no-lose situation here. We either, you know, like get the proof in the pudding that they're incompetent because nothing happens with all the bloody money in the world at their disposal, or we get the transfers that we should have got 2 weeks ago that we'll be raging about not getting 2 weeks ago, you know.
Because we've got bounced out of the Champions League. No, you're right. Either way, and either way, we know that there's an incompetence at that level, where you think to yourself, right, how can Michael Nicholson not negotiate a transfer Is it because he's never done it as a CEO in his life prior to be given in that position at Celtic? Well, maybe that's something to do with it, Quinny. You know, why not bring someone into that position at the football club who's going to be so intrinsically involved and connected to every transfer in and out the business, who's already got a track record in football or even in sport, right? Does he have good negotiating, easy for me to say, skills in the courtroom? Maybe. Perhaps he does, but that's different from going and buying footballers, is it not? So I think that one way or another, we are going to have to focus on everything that we do wrong in these scenarios. And it's getting called out by our own managers times 4. It's getting called out by players who have eventually left the club. It's getting called out by directors of other companies, other businesses, other football clubs. In relation to the flip of Brendan Rodgers, we've not had an opportunity to talk about that, Quinny, and we'll finish it off with a nice positive. Brendan Rodgers was being critical. He was throwing grenades. He was frustrated, etc. And then all of a sudden, in that pre-match press conference, it was a completely different story. I didn't buy it for 1 minute, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was definitely listening to him after the match and before it as well. It was very, very different to the way he's been chatting recently. And that I kind of thought there's been a break point somewhere. Something's given. I was kind of optimistic or hopeful that this kind of wake up call, this cold shower of Kairat would result, hopefully, and we'll cross our fingers, we'll see how it happens. But if things continue the way that they look to be going, if we don't get Dahlberg, we don't get replacements in, we've been eliminated and yada yada, somebody has to get sacked for that, And I'm not talking about Brendan, like director of football, chairman, whoever the problem has been. Like, there's just no way you can miss out on all that Champions League money and then fumble the transfer window so badly. And if the board do want to be as capitalistic as they try and hold themselves out to be, like, we're running this as a business and we're looking after the sustainability of the club and we're looking after the infrastructure, and they want to be real capitalists about it, then it's a results-driven game, and the results from whoever's making the decisions and spending the money or not spending the money should be comfortable. The only thing I would be kind of pleased with in the aftermath of this, failing that, is a contract for Brendan. And you would think a contract with Brendan would come with provisos of, these are the new terms of engagement, these are the new parameters that I work in, and we move forward with lessons learned. But after now listening to him and now seeing the way things are panning out, I'm confident of neither. So I know the chat's kind of jumping on me saying something similar. I am also in touch with reality. I know there's probably not going to be change happening at Celtic, but you hope, if something's going to make change, it's going to be line in the sand moments, and it's going to be failing the transfer window epically, which we're set up to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, though, in what you say. We know how Celtic operate, Quinny, but you're right in what you say when it comes down to the fact that the money that we have lost through failing to be prepared for a qualifier, added to one of the worst, at this moment in time, one of the worst transfer windows I can remember. I mean, the Adam Eder thing where, Swansea have got the images of Adam Eder being unveiled. They've got the pictures have been taken. They're ready to push the button, and we tell them to come back up the road. Why? You're not going to play him. He's a guy that he's checked out. You've told him you want rid of him. You're going to call him back. It's been shambolic. It really has been. We are going to do a show. Jungle Lion's given me a good idea today, and I'm going to do a show. Hopefully it's not a damp squib, and we'll do that leading up to the closure of the transfer window. Over 4,600 of you tuned in, so there's an appetite for transfer talk involved in Celtic. Would stay longer if we possibly could, but we'll give you another hour later on tonight. Thanks every single one of you for getting involved, as always. We've got a few gigs coming up in September, this month now, actually. The next one's the Seville boys, McNamara, Hartson and Petrov. We'll wonder if Petrov's a wee bit more honest when he's just on a stage with no phones on him. And that's happening in a couple of weeks' time. The link is underneath this video. And if you fancy a trip to Madrid, Acsom's going over there as well with Charlie MULGREW. All the information is under this video. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. And thank you to Quinny for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.